dealing with questions of Jewish ritual, but also, for example, questions of divorce and inheritance law. Responsa have existed as an independent genre in Jewish law since the Middle Ages, and how they were produced has changed over time. For example, in the Geonim era, that is from 7th to 11th century, and that's the era that I'm working on, responsa were debated in the Talmudic academies in Babylonia before being signed by the head of the academy that these questions were sent to. Thus, during that era, responsa were collective decisions, with some exceptions that are generally short and do not provide detailed evidence for the decisions made. A striking feature of responsa from the Gaonic era is the recurring use of specific phrases, typically employed at the beginning of the responsa. Some of these phrases are meant to emphasize the correctness of the statement that follow. The expression, "so was shown to us from heaven," serves this purpose. More commonly, introductory phrases emphasize continuity with earlier sages and inherited tradition. Formulations such as, "so our sages taught us," "so we learned from our fathers," and "so we have seen," serve to root the decision within the framework of transmitted halachic knowledge. These can be found in numerous responsa across the Gaonic period. Many responsa conclude with formulations that demand the implementation of the decisions given and classify any deviation as incorrect. Examples include, "this is the law," "this is the halacha," and one must not change it. What I'll discuss now is the genre of Zoroastrian legal responsa, often referred to in Pahlavi as Forsiyzabon, simply means questions. But in later periods, the term rivayat also came into use, though this label is somewhat misleading, as it refers more broadly to a variety of Zoroastrian texts, not just questions and answers. These responsa were written in Pahlavi and are mainly dated to the 9th and 10th century, and each text presents a dialogue between a petitioner and a priest. And while the answers clearly come from a priestly context, the questions themselves often reflect everyday concerns, which suggests that the texts were likely intended not just for priests, but also for educated lay readers. In fact, some of the petitioners are named, and there's no reason to assume that they were all members of clergy. That said, these texts offer very little in terms of historical context. Unlike the Gaonic responsa of the same period, which sometimes tell us where the question comes from, how it reached the academy, or whether the answer was followed, the Zoroastrian material is much more self-contained. We rarely get names, places, or situational details. Finally, when we speak of Zoroastrian responsa as legal sources, we need to be cautious. These are not law codes like Madiani Azadadistan, which is a law code from the Sasanian era. And they're not case law in strict sense either. Instead, they're collections of questions and answers dealing with legal, ethical, and theological matters, framed in a way that suggests a mixed guidance, education, and tradition. You don't have to read. The introductory phrasing in the Forsiyzabon varies significantly. However, a recurring pattern can occasionally be observed. For instance, in this, not this example, but in the responsa. In Rivayat of Ador Faranbai, the phrase, "as I understand," appears repeatedly. So all the responses, almost all of them starts with, "as I understand." The length and complexity of responsa also varies. Some are brief and direct. For example, the first example, that's the answer to the question. It is a sin deserving death, and nothing more. Others are far more elaborate, incorporating extended reasoning and addressing multiple potential scenarios raised by the questions. In such cases, the respondent often employs conditional clauses and hypothetical examples to explore different outcomes. Despite the variety of possible structure in responsa literature, many of these texts make repeated use of specific topoi and rhetorical strategies. By topoi, I refer to recurring argumentative tools or patterns that help shape the legal and moral reasoning of the responso. In the following section, I will examine a selection of responsa and highlight how these topoi function in the text. So, the first section, you still don't have to read. In an early 11th century responsum addressed to Haya Gaon, the Gaon of Pombedita, sages from Cairo in present-day Tunisia sought clarification on the effectiveness and permissibility of employing the divine name for various purposes, such as killing someone or calming the sea, to write the name and put it in the sea. In his responsum, which marks the second time Rav Haya addresses the sages of Cairo on this issue, he does not dismiss the power associated with invoking sacred names. Rather, he expresses concern about the legitimacy of those who inscribe the name and recommends caution in its use. Furthermore, within the same letter, he critiques accounts of sages in other communities who claim to have witnessed miraculous occurrences in public through the inscription of the divine name. He warns against placing credence in such narrative, asserting that it is only a fool who believes everything. One of the most interesting rhetorical features of Rav Haya Gaon's responsum is his use of astonishment topos, which is in Greek. Now we can read it. In which he employs to cast doubt on the validity of miraculous claims involving divine names. He opens with the phrase, "We are astounded at this," immediately signaling that the content of the inquiry is not just questionable, but beyond the bound of reasonable belief. This tone of incredulity continues when he states, "We do not know whether you are amazed at them or at us. If at them, this is as it should be." Further underlining his distance from the claims being described, Rav Haya does not directly refute the miracles attributed to sages. Instead, he uses astonishment as a rhetorical tool to delegitimize the opposing view without engaging in detail. This strategy subtly invites the reader to adopt a similarly skeptical stance, framing belief in such phenomena as not only irrational but also unworthy of serious halakhic attention. In addition to astonishment topos, Rav Haya Gaon subtly employs the authority topos to strengthen his rejection of the miraculous claims under discussion. While he does not cite specific rabbinic figures by name, he grounds his position in intergenerational scholarly tradition. In orange, he says, "We investigated greatly and heard from our fathers and fathers' fathers that they had investigated this and did not see the truth of things." This appeal to inherited inquiry function as non-textual form of legal authority. By emphasizing that his skepticism is not merely personal, but based on the accumulated judgment of past generations, Rav Haya presents his stance as the product of rigorous and continuous rabbinic scrutiny. This strategy frames his view as firmly within the mainstream of halakhic rationalism, distancing it from both personal speculation and a popular idea. In doing so, he reinforces the notion that legitimate halakhic decision-making emerges not from novel insights or mystical claims, but from careful alignment with the interpretive tradition of earlier sages. The final topos he uses is the clarity topos, where Rav Haya presents his conclusion as self-evident or undisputable by saying the general rule is only a fool will believe everything. Quoting Proverbs, it's imperfect. Quoting Proverbs, he reinforces that his view is not only reasonable but scripturally validated. This also closes the discussion. Believing such magic is something only a fool would do. Go to the next example. So, on a similar topic, one Zoroastrian responsum addresses a moral legal dilemma, whether a person who witnesses another committing sorcery or other capital sin is obligated to report the offense, even if they have no corroborating witness. The questioner also asks whether failing to speak out constitutes a sin, and whether such a witnessless report should render the accuser suspect. The response affirmed that if one sees or even knows of a person committing a crime, such as theft or a sin warranting death, failing to disclose this information is not proper. The respondent insists that silence in such cases leads to moral complicity. If the transgressor is not reported or is even released from confinement, the silent party is held accountable for the consequence of that person's further wrongdoing. This responder primarily employs clarity topos, asserting the conclusion as self-evident. Phrases like, it is not proper, and the casual logic of guilt by omission construct a position that leaves little room for doubt or counter-argument. Additionally, the authority topos is subtly present in the definitive tone and structure of the answer, which suggests it is grounded in a well-established legal tradition, even though no specific scripture or text is cited. The next example is from Sadia Gaon, the head of the Surah Academy in Babylon. So the question is about a woman. You don't have to read it. I summarize it. Her husband goes overseas, and then while he's away, she marries another man. And this another man was an apostate Jew, which means that he publicly violated the Sabbath, and they marry in a non-Jewish ceremony. She gives birth to a son. Now the husband returns and then divorces, or give her deed of divorce. And now the question is the child halakhically legitimate, or is the child a mamzer? And mamzer is a child born to a Jewish married woman who marries a Jewish man, but the other one is not her husband, the man. So the thing is, the child is not allowed to marry to an ordinary Jew for 10 generations. And that's the answer. You really don't have to read it. And this responsum, so to save you the time also, it's the child is a mamzer. So the responsum exemplified the layered rhetorical strategies employed by Sadia. It begins by drawing a crucial line between two spheres of halakhic evaluation, ritual observance such as Sabbath, observing and blessing, and personal status, including marriage, divorce, and lineage. This division sets the stage for the legal reasoning that follows, emphasizing that different halakhic categories require distinct criteria of assessment. The respondent then draws on the topos of authority, citing both Talmudic and Toseftan sources. They are in purple. To situate the ruling within the broader framework of rabbinic tradition. These references function not only to justify the legal conclusion, but also to anchor it as an uncontested lineage of jurisprudence, thereby neutralizing potential objections. In addition, the responsum employs the topos of conceptual clarification, making a deductive distinction between apostates who publicly desecrate the Sabbath and those whose conception and birth occurred within a Jewish framework. These analytical framings helps the reader understand why the child's status hinges not on the father's current behavior, but on his halakhic standing at the time of the child's conception. Moreover, the answer demonstrates the topos of finality and certainty, culminating in the emphatic declaration in blue, there is no doubt in this matter, this is the law, and no deviation can be allowed. Such rhetorical closure is a common feature in responsa literature, signaling the decisors' confidence and discouraging further debates. And my last example is Zoroastrian responsum addressed the legal spiritual status of an adopted son, particularly when the adoption is carried out on behalf of a deceased person. It considers whether such an adoption brings benefit to the deceased, how the adopted son should be accepted both ritually and legally, and whether the good deeds performed by the adopted son can aid the soul of the deceased, and more. So this one is employs several topoi to structure its argument and elevate its authority, most prominently the authority topos in purple. It's strongly present through extensive citations from the Avesta and Zan, so you see the citations. By grounding its claims in these texts, the respondent legitimized the legal and moral status of adoption within the framework of revealed tradition, thereby presenting the ruling as the continuation of a long-standing doctoral lineage. The clarity topos, in pink, is also central to the responsum structure. The repeated triad of good thought, good words, good deeds serve not only as a spiritual ideal, but as a clear ethical standard. The tone throughout is emphatic, categorical, and underscoring the that was so German, unambiguous obligation of the adopted son to perform good deeds on behalf of the deceased. The temporal topos is implied in the responsum is insistent that actions in this material world, rituals, prayers, moral conduct, have direct consequences for the soul of the deceased, thus linking present obligations with eternal outcomes. Lastly, the invocation topos is embedded through citation of divine dialogue and references to the ritual citations of names, which integrate the legal discussions into sacred and cosmological framework. Together, these topoi reinforce the responsum authority, theological weight, and ethical clarity. So, yeah, it's over. Very Germanized thought. So I showed that beyond the substantive legal content, responsa employ a variety of rhetorical strategy designed to persuade readers, assert authority, and anchor decisions within tradition. On the left side of the table, you see the different topos that are found so far in both Gaonic and Zoroastrian responsa. So what I hope to find more is that it's, I want to tell you, these are also, so there are several German scholars working on these, and they found them, but in modern responsa, so it's, there are way more, but I didn't find them. So it's, they basically for modern context of response, of the Jewish response. So what I hope to find out is that if I found more rhetorical motifs, not just topoi, but also other rhetorical strategies in both corpus, and what I'm particularly interested is that to see if I can find a pattern. So, for example, in the case of the woman and the child, in both, in Jewish and the Zoroastrian one, they refer to the legal sources. So they cite Talmud and they also cite Avesta, and I want to know if it's different with topic. So if it's about women, or it's different than if it's about men or boys. I also want to know why it is like that. And the whole question that I have is that what can we understand about this? So the questions that they sent, what do they show? And what can we understand about the life of Jews and Zoroastrian under the Muslim rule? Thank you.
Keep the discussion for the end, so you can ask your questions at the end. Now I invite my colleagues Elisa Bruno and Vasco La Salvia. Elisa Bruno is a researcher at the University of Florence. She's an archaeologist. She is part of the ERC project Armen, co-director of the excavations at the medieval Armenian capital of Tvin. Vasco La Salvia is from the University of Chieti. He is a specialist in late antique archaeology of the migration period, but he has also conducted research in India on the Malabar coast. So today they're going to talk about Iranian imported property along the maritime and terrestrial Silk Roads, case studies from Tvin, Armenia, and Madai, India. So,
and just one moment. Okay. This presentation aims to focus. No, it's okay. Thank you. Aims to focus through the case studies of Tvin in Armenia and Madai in India, the role of imported artifacts within different sites, distinguishing where possible their places of origin and the extent of the connecting trade networks along which they were distributed. We start from the case of Tvin and then we will go to India. The case study of Tvin, Okay. The case study of Wien is posed under the umbrella of our main project, and as Zara said before, which is in a nutshell focused to define a new framework for the study of the Armenian plateau and the surrounding area, from the southern Caucasus range to Anatolia and northern Mesopotamia, as a space of cultural entanglements between the 9th and the 14th centuries. In this context, we will therefore check the possible interconnection that can be identified through the road networks, which will be highlighted by the roots of the pottery. So, we will try to reflect about global technology, because especially for the glazed and enameled ceramics, there is a very widespread technology in Eurasian region between late antiquity and the Middle Ages. Wien, for us, it's of course, it's our case study, and it is a field laboratory. We try to understand the significance of the pottery from the excavation at Wien, if there are local productions and imports, and especially from where, if there is the imports. And at the end, we try to understand if Wien is or not a strategic hub between Persia, Caucasus, and Anatolia. Of course, from written sources, but also, because we are archaeologists, from archaeological evidence, trying to map the complex of road network. Okay, here I have indicated few of many pivotal historical moments of the city of Wien, from its documented foundation to its decline after Mongol conquest. And yes, in this slide, I have summarized the main moments of excavation conducted in the 20th century in Wien, of course, of many research groups. Our research started in autumn 2021, and we worked, the excavations involved two different areas in distinct sectors of the city. The first one is in the upper part of the city, and the other, the area 1000, and the other, it is the area 2000. Of course, the name are completely useful only for the documentation. Okay. Here I put just two strange drawings. On the right is a section of the excavations carried out at the South Tower in the years prior to our mission, and on the left a section at the same scale of the excavation we conducted using the stratigraphic method. I suppose that it is quite clear that the stratigraphic method makes it possible to identify all the activities carried out in the past, and in doing so to produce a new and independent source on which to base our reasoning in reconstructing the site's history. Okay? As you know, for the archaeologist, pottery is an essential tool because it survives in the archaeological record better than many other materials, and it allows us to talk about the daily life, the production, so tools to produce other things, other items and waste, and then tableware and luxury goods. Of course, even during the study of pottery, it is essential to use a correct method that enables us to quantify and also to define the chronologies of the context, and in the end, and for this presentation maybe it is the most important, to determine the places of origin of the artifacts. To discuss the topic of this paper, I have chosen to focus in particular on two types of pottery, lacerware and Minai ceramics. The Minai can be seen at the top and the lacerware below. Of course, now here I choose the small pieces because when we dig, the fragments are often very small, and if we are lucky, we can find more pieces to reconstruct the vase. Here you can see other fragments of Minai from the Dvin excavation. These artifacts, lacerware and Minai ceramics, were more or less produced in Iran. The scholarly literature often refers to them as products from Kashan, a label that encompasses a broader network of production centers which played a pivotal role in the dissemination of these high-value objects. Since now we can affirm that both lacerware and Minai pottery in Dvin surely dated to the 12th and the 13th centuries, because of course we work with the context and stratigraphic methodology. Okay, but how can we imagine that these materials reached Dvin? Which routes might they have taken? Along what possible itineraries? We can see a table with itineraries mentioned in different written sources, and we can focus that Dvin has the characteristics of a place that generates roads due to reasons of political geography, religion, and also as well as a favorable geomorphological environment. Closely connected to its geographical position and geomorphology, which make it a true corridor, the Ararat Valley constitutes a long-term road area marked by the almost constant presence of large cities and capitals from the Urartian period, Erebuni, to the present day. Yerevan is in this valley. Okay. In attempting to summarize the proposed overview, it is possible to identify within the three periods for which sources are most substantial three distinct moments in which Dvin and the Aras Valley were integrated into commercial traffic in different ways, as you can see in the slide. I'm going faster to finish for my colleague. But if between the 10th and 13th century the non-written sources do not mention itineraries centered on Dvin, the excavation have yielded many materials of Iranian origin, as you know, Minai, lacerware, and fruitware. That this last one I don't mention before because the research is not yet very good. And this evidence not only confirms the presence of high-quality Iranian imports at the site, but also situates Dvin within the broader network of luxury ceramic exchange that connected production centers in Iran, often associated in literature with Kashan, to keynotes of the Caucasus and beyond during this period. Moreover, the transit routes provide a valuable starting point for analyzing the connections expressed through material culture. In this context, in the context of Dvin and in our researches, architecture, building techniques, and urban planning. As has been reiterated in numerous studies on the concept of road, commercial routes carried on not only people and goods, but also ideas, knowledge, and technologies. Thanks a lot for Dvin, and let us now turn our attention to India with Professor La Salvia. Sì.
Who left us last October. He was one of the greatest scholars in dealing with Middle Eastern and Chinese pottery. And we miss him a lot. We have the nation Badaki Nil, Dilevan and Abdullah Anshilat, and Ofira Gamilel from the University of Glasgow. We are strongly indebted to Abdullah Anshilat, who is an advocational archaeologist whose love for his own country and historical heritage is more than something that you can imagine. So the next one, please. So Madai is located on the Malabar coast, an area pivotal for the medieval international trade, and as noted already by Shada Houri, a major role is and was played by the monsoon system. The next one. The topography of the area. We are at the mouth of the Kupang River. There are three main locations from our survey have given us pottery shells. The Madai Mosque, which is attributed to the, let's say, beginning of the 12th century, even though a strong debate is going on. It's one of the earliest mosques in Kerala. The Madai Fort, and you cannot see very well, it's the Jewish Pond, another place. For that, I'm sorry that the people interested in the Jewish connections left the room in advance. Okay, the next one. You see, the mosque, the fort, and the Jewish Pond. Those are the routes that were circulated by our object. Next one. This is the main location, the fort, which is on Latherite Hill, placed on 250 meters above the sea level. It's on a Latherite plateau, and on its back, it's facing the ocean, and at its back, there is one of the few mountains that you can see on the flat Malabar coast. This is Mount Eli, or Ezimala, as they call it, and it's one of the few locations that has been named throughout the history. From Ptolemy, that actually Professor De Romanis tend to identify Mount Eli with the Ptolemaic Chersonesos, as it is mentioned by the early Muslim sources like Ibn Qurtatbeh and until Ibn Battuta, who is giving a full report on the activity of the mosque and of the market that was placed at the end of the river Kupang. Moreover, Marco Polo also is talking about this place, telling us that the fortress, which belonged to the Colatini family, and that in the way we are presenting it now, is in the form that it assumed during the late Middle Ages with the Colatini family, the Colastri in the Western sources of the late medieval period. It's a huge fortress, looking and controlling the other settlements closer to the sea and to the Kupang river. Okay, now if you go to the last, so again, some other picture of the fortress, which you can see from the inside. This is just archaeological hints. You see from the inside that what you see outside is precisely the framework of it, but inside you see a lot of other signs of previous and different occupation of the fortress itself, of the area itself. So the next one, and you go. Those two slides are just to give you an idea of the amount of pottery that we have found there. So we are not dealing only with Mesopotamian pottery, but there is a huge set of Eastern production coming to the same harbor. That is to say, Chinese, Indo-Chinese pottery as well. Next one. And this is the chronology. As you see, there is a gap between the 11th and the 13th century, more or less, which is rather typical of the Indian Ocean trading network due to political instability somehow. Okay, the next one. And you go, yeah. Yes, yes. First, TGP. Turquoise alkaline glazeware. The research of Field, Priestman, Kennett, among the others, this is a specific pottery typology that has a long production tradition. Started possibly during the Achaemenid period. It continued through the Sasanian rule when the glazing became thicker. Between late Sasanian and early Abbasid rule, we have the opportunity to see the glazing becoming all thicker and thicker. It witnessed a significant and consistent increasing in both its production and diffusion along the trading routes exactly during the late Sasanian and the early Abbasid period, as it is proven by findings in Gujarat. I will not mention all the location for your mental sanity. The shards having a blue glazing ceased to be manufactured by the end of the 10th century. The next one. I hope you can see, the texture of the pottery is rather peculiar, ranging from yellow to light gray, and witnessing, however, always its riverine origin, containing extremely pure clay from the banks of the Euphrates River, and its production sites having been located within the Basra area. After this one, the TGP, we have found the next one, very interesting, early monochrome ring sgraffiato. Again, after the ceasing of production of TGP, other glazing vessels were produced. This one, again, very similar texture, very similar production area, southern Mesopotamia. Between the end of the 10th and the 12th century, again, southern Mesopotamia as the production center. Together with these, also later polychrome sgraffiato have been found, again, 10th, 12th century, largely distributed among the Indian Ocean trading routes. And last but not least, torpedo jar. What is it? The queen of the transport vessel within the Indian Ocean maritime Silk Road. Known as a Mesopotamic production, notwithstanding lack of findings of furnaces. Again, covering a huge chronological horizon from Parthic to Sasanian period through the early Abbasid, ringing with the bead-like moulding, coralless and cylindrical in its form, with a tall, hollow base of a small diameter. There is one of these torpedo jar kept in the Samarkand Museum, which has been attributed to Hellenistic phase. I don't know why, but it's clearly a torpedo jar, which differentiated these kind of jars from the Roman counterpart that we are encountering often together in some Indian harbors. There are other places where these kind of jars have been found in India and Sri Lanka, which can help us to secure a better chronology and to assess the fact that late Sasanian and early Abbasid period was the peak of production for these vessels as well. This Samaharama in Sri Lanka, the citadel excavation, and the phase pertaining to late Sasanian and early Abbasid is the phase that gave us the vast majority of fragments of this pottery. Ras Hafun in Somalia, the so-called Swahili coast, same kind of pottery horizon, where this kind of vessel always is coming together with the TGP that I showed you previously. So there is an entire set of pottery originating from Mesopotamia that is coming together, that was somehow traveling together on the same boats throughout the Indian Ocean trading route. Alagan Kulam in the port of the Gulf of Mannar, same thing. In phase 2 and phase 3, let's say the late Achaemenid and throughout all the Sasanian phase where the production was increased, also are talking about the same feature. This is an example, and I'm going to conclude, point to a peak of distribution during the late Sasanian period. As Whitehouse and Williamson emphasize, pre-Islamic trade flows from Persian Gulf, even still in the 6th century Common Era. Sasanians still maintain control over Gulf coastline and in the Indian Ocean, over stretch extending from Aden to Karachi in the Indus Delta. Ubula, a pre-Islamic port near Basra, is cited by early Muslim writers as a privileged gateway to India, and it likely served as a port for Mesopotamian pottery towards the southeast. It's not surprising, though, that the majority of the torpedo jars were found in northern Indian regions, once under control of western satraps, whose under territory included Kutch, Surashtra, the northern Konkan coast, and Maharashtra. So in an economic context dominated by the production of the Iranian plateau. This situation, however, did not cease after the conquer of the, once Iran fell under Islamic rule. It took some time to recover, but apparently it continued during the early Abbasid rule, as it is proven not only by the finding that we had in Madai, which exactly can be placed in the Abbasid period, that rich in Mesopotamian ceramic, as I said, but also is proven by epigraphic and written sources, if I may say. We have actually an epigraphy in Pantalain Kolam, dated to the year 166 of the Hijra, that is to say 752 Common Era. It's a very early dating for having an Islamic grave in the Malabar coast. And moreover, more importantly, there is the so-called Quilon, Tabula Quilonensis, or the copper plate of Kolam, which is a privilege given to the Nestorian priest, or Nestorian man, better to say, Sapir Iso, Marwan Sapir Iso Joseph, a Nestorian Christian, by the king under the Chera rule of the moment, Shanu Ravi Varma. a privilege for trading and having the possibility to build a warehouse in Kollam. The important fact is not only that, I mean, it is written in Malayalam, but the important fact that under the documents, which is a copper plate, we have signatures. And the signatures are in Pahlavi, in Kufik, and in Persian Hebrew. So again, we have the witnessing of a merchant, of a community of merchants of different faith, but I think that I can boldly say that all these people were united by the fact that they were all mostly coming from Persia. They were united by the fact that they were all of Mesopotamian origin. And with that, I thank you and I say goodbye to everybody.